Welcome to our webinar on how to build the value of your agency, the latest in our Selling Your Business series. It's great to see so many of you joining us this morning, hopefully indicative of the topic and how interesting and valuable it is to everybody, and quite a lot of regulars with us as well. For those of you who aren't so familiar with us, Morkins & Smith is a top 10 firm of accountants, tax and corporate finance advisors. We work with businesses across many different commercial sectors, as well as not-for-profit and private client. And in the West End office, we have a team of 9 partners and around 100 individuals working exclusively with media and marketing services clients. We have a media specialist corporate finance team. They do a lot of M&A, particularly in sell-side advisory, taking sellers through the entire sales process. They do a lot of strategic growth services, helping businesses to get into shape ahead of an exit event, and lots of financial due diligence as well for sort of some of the strategic acquirers, as well as private equity houses. In 2024, our media M&A and our M&A tax team completed 11 transactions between them, with the highlights being the sale of Total Media to Service Plan Group's Media Plus and New Commercial Arts to WPP. And the team were also awarded Media M&A Team of the Year, so well done to them. MKS have also recently completed a couple of transactions of our own as we continue our exciting growth journey. So we've acquired Shipley's, which is a film TV specialist firm. They do a lot in tax credits, so that's another string to our bow. And also Statham Gill Davis, which is a legal firm with a heritage in music and media. And we're also part of more global international network with offices in over 100 different countries, so very well placed to help you with your international growth and aspirations. So today is the first of a series of sessions that are going to explore the key traits that influence the success of agencies and the essential steps that agency owners need to be taking to build value ahead of a potential exit. And these steps form part of our agency exit programme. And this is designed to help owners of agencies get their businesses into the best shape possible for an exit, and to really maximise their valuation, given that it's probably going to be a once-in-a-lifetime event. So we'll be covering various aspects of that throughout this series. The second event in the series will take place on Wednesday, the 29th of January, and will feature the launch of our latest research into how agencies stay ahead, the DNA of winning agencies, and we'll do that in conjunction with Spring 8020. And that sort of follows research that we've launched before on Fortune Favours the Brave and Survivor to Thrive, which some of you may have read, and we did that in conjunction with Spring 8020 as well. For those of you who haven't signed up yet, we'll be sending out invites as a reminder, email after this webinar, so hopefully see some of you there. So before we get into the meat of today, George Hatswell, one of the directors from our media corporate finance team, is going to take you through our latest quarterly media M&A update. Before I hand you over to George to kick things off, just a couple of housekeeping points. The webinar is being recorded, so please do share with any peers or colleagues who couldn't make it today. Keen to have a lively conversation. This webinar is for you, so please do ask questions as we go through, and I'll weave them into the panel session that's coming later. Please do put questions into the Q&A function, much easier to keep track of them there. And lastly, always keen to hear your thoughts and suggestions of future topics covered in these webinars, so do please fill out the feedback form at the end. It's very, very short and it is super useful. So over to you, George.
Thanks very much, Esther, and hello everyone. Let me get my slides up and then we can kick off. So, what has happened in the marketing services sector from a mergers and acquisition point of view in the last 12 months? Well, this chart shows all the deals involving agencies with a UK presence. And as you can see, following a real spike of deal making in 2022, 2024 came up with roughly the same amount of deals as 2023, which is not an insignificant achievement considering the macroeconomic factors experienced in the United Kingdom in the last 12 months. However, the annual figures only tell one half of the story. Whilst 2023 had a strong start, then tailed off, 2024 started off strongly with some ups and downs along the way. The first quarter of 2024 saw 71 deals, and after a blip in Q2, quarters 3 and 4 came back relatively strongly, with Q4 being driven by a number of deals pushed through in October ahead of what promised to be quite a difficult budget. The result of which ended up being small and medium-sized people-based businesses bearing the brunt of the government's hike in employers' national insurance contributions, which will no doubt have an impact on the media M&A landscape as we head into 2025. But what was being bought in 2024? Our data shows that, unsurprisingly, data and analytics businesses were at the top of acquirers' shopping lists, followed by experiential, creative, and PR agencies. In the modern world, data analytics is a recurring trend, with agencies increasingly being asked to help clients extract as much value as they can from endless amounts of data generated through numerous different channels. Whether this is consulting on an end-to-end data strategy, implementing software to generate new data sets, or extracting insights from already existing data, these capabilities continue to be highly sought after from clients and subsequently acquirers. Some key data and analytics deals this year were Ipsos acquiring Germany, a UK agency focused on harnessing, analysing, and modelling sales and marketing data to improve business intelligence and engagement. And also in the MarTech space, marketing automation group Spotler acquiring the e-commerce, automation, and customer data platform Redeye. Experiential agencies have been riding the crest of a post-COVID wave, with both B2B and B2C businesses looking for the most engaging ways to drive connections and spending from consumers and clients alike. This year saw the experiential creative agency Smile Group bought by the Human Network. And a really interesting deal was Ingenuity acquiring marketing event business Madfest, which I'm sure a few people on this webinar will have attended in the past. Whilst AI is causing some disruption in certain sectors, this is none more so than for creative agencies, where the use of it and emerging technology will be make or break. Following WPP's acquisition of New Commercial Arts in August, Mark Reed commented that, even when we are in a world of AI, we still need world-class creative ideas. This sentiment hits home the point that if you can make your high-performing staff even more productive through the use of new technologies, not only will you be able to deliver from a quality and quantity point of view in order to service clients, but you'll be able to drive financial gains that make your agency attractive from an acquirer's perspective. Finally, there have been numerous and significant acquisitions in the PR space, with the most disruptive deal for the sector being WPP recently selling their 50% stake to FGS Global to American private equity giant KKR at a whopping 17 times multiple and valuing the business at about $1.7 billion. This is a real shot in the arm for the sector, with either a strong wave of acquisitions to follow or a complete shake-up of the way PR is conducted. As in order to generate a financial return, KKR will need to make some significant changes at FGS that will trickle down through the sector. Moving on to types of acquirers, you can see it was a bit of a mixed bag this year in terms of who was acquiring. The networks had a pretty quiet year compared to 2023, with Havas and Publicis being the most acquisitive, with 4 deals apiece. Havas in particular focused on the UK market, buying the B2B agency Ledger Bennett, creative social agency Wilderness, and digital data agency DMPG. It will be interesting to see what they have in store for next year, following their spin out from Vivendi and listing on the public markets in Amsterdam recently in December. Publicis' acquisitions included creative production house Downtown Paris, e-commerce agency Mars United Commerce, and Spanish digital transformation agency 3Dids. Challenger activity was dominated by Stagwell, who made 11 acquisitions in total, including London brand and creative agency Sidekick and culture first brand agency Team Epiphany. Despite their share price collapsing by 55% year on year, Next 15 still managed to do 4 deals. These included brand and comms consultancy Tuva Partners and creative studio La Plage, both of those through their comms group MHP. and they also acquired public sector consultancy Cadence Innova by Transform. The consultants pulled back this year with only a handful of deals, the biggest of which being Accenture, purchasing comms and engagement agency Unlimited Group via their Accenture Song brand. This sees Unlimited Group's PE backers from 2016, DB Advisors, exit after 8 years, and I'll discuss the PE back groups on the next slide. A general theme this year, though, was a much larger number of smaller and off-market deals, along with an increase in EOTs and MBOs. This is definitely the result of tough trading conditions for agencies, as advertising spend suffered and continued staff cost inflation impacted profits. This meant a large number of potential sellers held off from going to market, waiting for a boost in trading to secure meaningful valuations. Another aspect that is having an impact on the market is the appetite of the PE-backed groups. 2024 saw 50% of the deals in the marketing services sector having PE involvement, which was down slightly on 57% in 2023. Lots of the PE-backed groups have either been through or are coming up to their secondary transaction, where they swap out their current PE investor for another. This has an impact on the volume of deals, as new investors will have their own ideas on expansion strategies. Brain Labs, for example, were hugely acquisitive, doing 9 deals in the space of 2.5 years up until 2022. But then M&A went on hold whilst they found new investors in Falfurious Capital, and subsequently picked up Sparrow, an Australian digital agency, in January. This is causing a bit of uncertainty in the space. However, once the PE-backed groups are through these hurdles, we can expect another explosion of activity. This is evidenced by MSQ, who, after swapping out Lloyd's Development Capital for the US-based One Equity Partners, made 2 acquisitions this year. United Digital Group, a 350-person customer experience agency, and American creative agency Spaceship. These enlarged groups are looking to expand their worldwide presence when it comes to size, but they still appear to be eager for domestic and European deals where there's a deep capability that can support their client needs. This means the private equity-backed groups will continue to be a big driver of deals in the sector going forwards. So, what's the outlook for 2025? Great buyers for quality agencies. The economic climate in the UK has been very tough recently, which has had a direct impact on advertising spends in what has been a tricky year for agencies. However, there is a fantastic fragmented pool of buyers out there looking to expand their capabilities and market shares, which means that for agencies that are performing well, multiples are still looking very healthy as buyers are willing to spend and supply is down on previous years. Renewed appetite from the US. The UK remains at the forefront of the marketing services sector for innovation and quality. With the combination of a strong dollar, tight US labour market, and UK stock markets cheaper than the US, we expect US buyers to continue to invest in the UK to expand their capabilities and paying good multiples in the process. Finally, sector-wise, we expect to see a continued rise in social media spending in Europe, following behind the US and Asia, as consumers are increasingly looking to purchase goods promoted by influencers and through social channels. This is a great opportunity for social first and e-commerce agencies to grow their businesses and expand their offerings. So we're anticipating a wave of social, influencer and e-commerce deals this year. So thank you from me, and back over to you, Esther.
Thank you very much, George, and hopefully we do see that improvement in the market over the next year. Although I'm sure that 15 multiple on the sale of FGS Global is ringing loudly in everyone's ears. I would caution in getting too excited that that is the new multiple, because I think most deals are being done at significantly lower than that. Isn't that right, George?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit of a landmark deal for the sector, and yeah, it's pretty unprecedented.
Yeah, okay. Thought I'd just add that in there. People hear numbers like that and get overexcited. So sort of moving on to the main topic for today then. So we work with lots of agency owners looking to build value into their businesses, and we have a structured workshop which helps them to assess how they're performing against various different key value drivers, and then we help them put in strategies to improve those areas in the business where there is underperformance. And this is a key module within our agency exit programme. Details of which we'll share after this webinar. So Paul Winterflood, our lead media corporate finance partner, is now going to introduce the topic and demonstrate why understanding key value drivers is so important when you're thinking about an exit. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Esther, and good morning, everyone. Great to see so many of you on the webinar again this morning. So for the next 5 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about valuation and what drives it. As you've heard from George, the macroeconomic environment has been tough. Client spend has been harder to come by, and in turn, growth has been harder to come by. As a result, we've seen a quieter M&A market as has left businesses in the position to be able to sell for the valuations that their owners are looking for. The good news, again explained by George, is that there's a lot of well-funded acquirers. So those agencies that are in a strong position will be highly sought after. What that means is that sellers need to work smarter and harder for both growth and also to get exit ready. And clearly valuation is a fundamental part of that. As the adage goes, valuation is an art, not a science. But as founders and managers within agencies, there's plenty you can do to stack things in your favor if you're strategic. And it's important to understand what drives value as well as what steps you can take to optimize value in advance of an exit. And so that's what we're going to cover this morning. So let's just start with the valuation basics. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on your view, selling an agency is not quite as simple as just sticking a for sale sign up and asking for a price. There's a lot more nuance to it than that. A valuation of an agency business, I'm sure you all know, is based off earnings, which is normally EBITDA times by a multiple. That gets you to enterprise value. On top of that, you add the excess cash in the business to calculate equity value. The mistake that a lot of people make is that they focus too much on the earnings and not enough on what drives the multiple and therefore what the value drivers are. Valuations are based on the expectations of an agency's future earnings. For most owner-managed businesses and SMEs, the best guide to the future is typically the past, and therefore, for a lot of businesses, a modest multiple of historic profits is normally applied to calculate the valuation. However, for agencies that have strong value drivers that they can evidence to acquirers through data, as well as a track record of growth and improvement, and importantly, a strategic plan to continue that growth into the future, these will attract a high multiple as the expectation of future profits and earnings will be higher. As Esther mentioned, at MKS, when we work with agencies on preparing for an exit, or even just looking to build profitability and value, we assess them through the lens of value drivers. We split these out into 10 drivers of value, most of which drive profit directly, but most importantly, all drive value. Esther mentioned we're hosting a seminar next week, and at that we'll discuss the traits of highly successful agencies. So I'm not going to go through these specific traits on this webinar, but they're very much aligned with these categories. Instead, I'm going to demonstrate the importance of understanding why it's crucial to understand what drives your value and how that can impact the exit. Every agency will have different characteristics and profitability profiles. And so here we're going to illustrate the point with 3 different agencies. What you'll see is that we have scored each on a traffic light system against the 10 drivers of value. We've shown the profit of each agency at the bottom and applied a multiple to calculate the enterprise value. So firstly, if we start with agency A, so this business we're saying generates profits of 1.2 million, but when it comes down to the drivers of value, it performs very, very badly. It looks like there's substantial owner and client reliance here, and therefore no income security going into the future, as well as various other poor factors at play. It therefore scores very badly from a multiple perspective and potentially isn't even sellable at all. So in this instance, I appreciate this as an extreme. We've applied a multiple of 0 to this one. The next agency, agency B. This one has half the profits, we're saying 600,000, but it's got a far better client mix and certainly better sales processes. It's still got owner reliance, so that one's still a red flag, but it's likely to attract interest from acquirers at a low multiple. So we've valued it at a multiple of 3, converting into a valuation of 1.8 million. The final agency in our case study, again, has lower profits currently, and I think that's the operative word here at 600,000. But the owners have worked hard to diversify the client base. They've invested in a sales and marketing function and second tier, and this has started to deliver growth. The growth expectations, therefore, of this agency is far higher, so it attracts a multiple of 8, meaning that it's 2.7 times as valuable as agency B, which generates the same level of current profitability, and significant, and obviously infinitely times more in the open market versus agency A. And whilst it's a slightly tenuous example, it very much illustrates that if you can understand the drivers of value and optimize them to be more like agency C than agency A, then you can significantly improve both your saleability as well as your valuation, and of course profitability in the short term as well. The final slide, just for this introduction, is that we're showing the opportunity for agencies to get this process right. For the purposes of where we're at today, we're at point A. So we've got the valuation on the y-axis, and the passing of time towards a sale process and beyond is on the x-axis. The period of time B is where the agency could be preparing for a sale. So if an agency doesn't do anything proactively, it will likely follow the grey line at the bottom through the period prior to an exit. What that means is it will generate incremental levels of growth and value improvement, but certainly nothing spectacular. The alternative is that agency owners really start to work on and understand what drives value within the agency. And the process of working on the business, focusing on value drivers, is likely to improve profits too. Agencies that improve both of those two things concurrently leads to a rapid escalation in value. And agencies that do this follow the blue line. Then there's a further kicker when we get to deal time. So time period C which is the green shaded area, is what we're calling the time when the company is being potentially marketed for sale, going through due diligence, as well as through an earn-out. And this period of time, certainly in terms of the time from agreeing a transaction to closing it, could take 3 to 6 months, depending on the situation. So it's a significant amount of time to be under the microscope. Again, the grey line. So this business hasn't done anything to plan pre-exit. It's not exit ready. They're underprepared for the scrutiny of a sale. What often happens, unfortunately, is the owners often get distracted by the process, and in situations where there's a heavy element of owner reliance, growth then stalls. This is then compounded by a lack of preparation for your due diligence, all of which are more likely to result in price chips and therefore a falling valuation through the deal process. Conversely, the blue line. So this agency is in great shape. Systems and processes ensure they continue to grow through the sale. They're highly attractive to acquirers, resulting in another auction process, and they're also due diligence ready. So due diligence is often shorter, and they're far less likely to experience a price chip. This means that even through the deal process, the valuation will be continuing to grow. What this very much demonstrates is why it can be so beneficial to get this right and really to work hard at optimizing the drivers of value. So the final point before I hand back to Esther is that for anybody that's got an eye on an exit at any point in the future, should make sure that you understand the drivers of value and also to understand how you're performing against them, so you know what to prioritize. If you focus on if you focus on them, then in combination will likely become more profitable as well as attract a higher multiple. And those two things in combination have a very, very powerful impact on valuation, as you can see. So on that note, I'll hand back to Esther at this point.
Thank you very much, Paul. So, having heard why it's so important to understand the drivers of value, I'm delighted to be joined by Steven Mallon, who is going to share some of his experiences in working with agency owners and supporting them to build value, particularly from a sales and marketing, client service and leadership development perspective. Steven is the founder of the Argent Consultancy. He's also an independent non-executive director, advisor, coach and mentor to agencies across the whole of the marketing, digital and media sectors. His first-hand experience of scaling a business from startup to sale as director of Big Mouth Media, growing the agency to 24 million before merging with LBI and being acquired by Publicis Group in 2011. As managing director of the UK media for Digitas, he oversaw a £30 million portfolio and a 120-strong team. And for the last 6 years, Steven has partnered with agency founders and leadership teams to help them devise and deliver plans for growth and the development of their business. So I'm going to be asking Steven a few questions. And in the second half of the session, Paul's also going to join us as well to share his experiences from an M&A point of view. But as I said, this is your webinar. We want you to get the most value out of it. So if you have any questions that you want me to put to Steven or Paul, please do put them in the Q&A function and I will try and weave those in as we go along. So Steven, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Perhaps if you start off by talking about some of the common traits that you found working with agency owners who've maximised their valuation and exit position.
Yep, thanks for the introduction, Esther, and good morning, everyone. Yes, in my experience of working with agencies across the sector, there are a number of commonalities and traits in those agencies who've maximised their value and their exit position. And it's directly linked to what Paul's just outlined in terms of value drivers. There's been an embedded awareness and understanding of those value drivers, and they've understood how they contribute not only to maximising the exit position, but to building value over time through growth and development of the agency. They've also understood, though, that potential buyers need to see those value drivers in place to be attractive as a potential acquisition. So they've developed what I call an M&A consciousness, not an expertise, but a consciousness, which allows them to view their business with a buyer's lens. And they're able to critique the strengths and weaknesses of their business against that optimal sale-ready state. The second thing that then happens is they develop a plan for optimizing those value drivers, as Paul's described, developing the agency towards creation of value. So they've been able to assess and critique the relative strengths and weaknesses against an optimal sale-ready agency. They've been able then to purposefully develop and strengthen the areas of the business, the value drivers, over a period of time. They're tracking over a period of time the effectiveness and performance of those value drivers. And they're also able to aid the decision making that they have in place, both short term and long term, because things start to become more in service to the wider plan rather than the immediate issues that take place in any agency inevitably. The third shift in focus or trait that we see in commonality that we see is owner and founder shift in focus and activity. They move from tactical to being strategic. They move from being MDs to being CEOs. They gradually spend more time on the business and less time in the business. So they become more responsible for driving the plan and less responsible for being consumed in the day-to-day issues of the agency. So optimal exits tend to have been well thought out, well planned, and typically over an extended period of time, usually 3 years. They have well thought out action plans in the key areas of the business with an understanding of what we have to be, have, and do to maximize the position of the sale-ready position. They've been very targeted and focused and specific in prioritizing and actioning plans against those. So actively developing the different levers, the different value drivers, and strengthening those and addressing those with strategic initiatives over a period of time. So those that have been strategic and planned and focused in strengthening those value drivers tend to have maximized their position in my experience. A good recent example, I won't mention specific names, but there was a deal announcement earlier this month with a Dubai-based digital commerce business that I know very well and have done some work with. They set out upon a very structured and deliberate approach to building out those key value drivers. The founders started that process 3.5 years ago with a fairly rigorous, comprehensive plan, and they focused time and investment in key areas of their business to strengthen and optimize their end position, their exit position. And that's included, most notably, a sustainable approach to revenue growth through effective sales and marketing, and really vitally, leadership team development to establish a capable and proven team, giving guarantees and assurances around succession planning, as well as actually helping to deliver progress on the value drivers over that 3.5-year period, ultimately culminating in a recognised reduction in owner reliance. What we see and hear about, of course, is the deal announcement, the end point. What we don't often hear about are the intervening 3.5 years to gradually build and optimise the value and form that sale-ready business over time.
Thanks, Steve. I mean, progressive revenue growth is a bit of a given in terms of building value, but what transitions need to take place within agencies to maximise their growth opportunities?
Yeah, revenue growth is a primary driver, as we all know and understand, but it's not only about the level of growth, it's also about how sustainable that growth is. As Paul mentioned in his piece there, you know, we've got to start thinking about, as agency owners, that acquirers aren't buying the business as it stands at the sale point. They're buying the future contribution of that business in the wider entity. So we've got to think about guaranteeing or maximising the opportunity for progressive year-on-year growth at all stages of the journey to build value. And if we wind that right back to start up and grow up and early scale up businesses, they've typically grown through first party referrals and responses to inbound inquiries. And that at that stage is perfectly good. It tends to be sufficient up to a point. But to progress beyond the 3 million into the 5 million and beyond, agencies need to be able to secure more diverse and robust sources of new business. Referral networks by nature are finite, and inbound is unpredictable, particularly as we've seen over the last 18 months or so in difficult economic times. So it becomes a potential limiter to growth. So to counteract that, there are several key transitions that can and need to happen over time to support that progressive growth up to being sale ready and beyond that through there. The first of which is a much more proactive approach to sales and marketing. This is about being really deliberate in connecting with and engaging your target clients as part of your audience, the key sectors that you work within, and the key potential buyers that you have. And that really involves expanding your network to include more target customers and potential buyers. Over time, you can communicate with that potential client base more directly, develop a means to engage with them, and start to build the respect and trust with them that is a benefit of working with first-party referrals. They start to understand us, they start to know that we work on their pains and their barriers, we have solutions that can help them overcome those barriers and create value for them. And by doing that, that supports a wider pool of potential pipeline and starts to indicate that revenue growth can become more sustainable. The second component of that is what are we actually saying to that market? So a solutions and outcomes-based proposition and positioning and messaging is really important. To build respect and trust with our target audiences, we need to talk about what concerns them, what pains do they have, what problems do they have, what are their needs, what challenges do they face, and what barriers do they have. That's where our solutions fit, and we help them overcome those challenges and barriers, and that's where value is created, commercial and strategic value. And if we want to devise a position with our clients as a strategic partner, a valuable partner, we really have to emphasize and demonstrate that value centrally within the proposition. But we need to emphasize that over and above services and features, as we commonly do as we're starting up and building out as a early phase scale up organization. So things like thought leadership, market knowledge, research, etc., and messaging that presents pain and problems faced by our clients and how we overcome them helps us to position ourselves as a value creator on behalf of our client. And the best form of pipeline, the one that's most likely to convert and therefore the most sustainable, as we've spoken about, are clients whose needs and wants match what we offer. And that's a great way of building a pipeline of targeted, focused clients that we know we can do great work for, we know we can create value from. However, that's all top end, that's all pipeline focus. So the third component, the third transition component, is a methodology to manage sales from initial opportunity creation through to close. Pipeline's fantastic, that's opportunity, but it's closed deals and secured revenues that make the difference. That's where real growth is, and that's where value creation lies. But agencies, in my experience, tend to be variable in their ability to manage sales cycle. So there's often a lack of a repeatable, scalable, best practice approach from initial lead qualification through to close, and that can lead to quite unpredictable sales performance. And that comes through in different symptoms: pitching too many deals, spending time on the wrong things, maybe sometimes pitching things when we shouldn't be that aren't in the agency sweet spot. So investing in a best practice approach helps us manage that. We devise a single way of working that's scalable and repeatable. We qualify correctly. We often then move towards working fewer but better opportunities and doing it well, and subsequently improving win rates. So creating those good behaviors through sales cycle supports the pipeline development by enforcing and embedding a higher win rate. Effective qualification, meeting economic buyers who are budget holders and making them advocates of our solutions, asking the very, very best questions to correlate the solutions that we have with their needs, and effectively moving towards co-creating business cases with our clients. So these three capabilities, these three transitions, tend to combine to create a high-performance sales and marketing engine that becomes sustainable up to the point of being sale ready, but beyond the point of being acquired as well. And that acts as a serious value driver.
I mean, what are the sort of the key things that an acquirer wants to see in place, or the sort of the tick boxes for them?
They want to de-risk and gain assurance that the future performance of the business, the future promises that are being made are going to come to fruition. And that's usually about consistent year-on-year growth through new revenue acquisition that becomes additive to their business model. So buyers want that assurance. They want to ensure that the acquired agency is going to be additive and that the future performance of that business stands up to scrutiny, that the forecasts are real. So they need to be able to see a structured approach to new business. A lot of businesses in the early phases, as Paul has alluded to, owner-managed centricity and relationship-based sales based on their network. So alleviating that and moving away from that over time to have a much more kind of enterprise-scaled sales model de-risks that and takes emphasis away from owner reliance. So that tuned sales engine that can deliver consistent growth is really, really important. They also want to see a sales capability that's robust in the face of challenging market conditions. There aren't too many agencies out there today posting really, really impressive growth, but those that are posting impressive growth against unfavorable market conditions, shall we say, tend to impress upon potential acquirers in a more emphasized way. But also the other things that an acquirer will want to see is firm connectivity to the target market and audience. Am I relevant? Do I have a good positioning, etc.? Therefore, is my pipeline over time going to be sufficient to sustain the growth that we want to see? And are we messaging the right things? Are we taking a consultative stance? Are we a valued partner of a business rather than a commodity provider? Those are the types of staples that an acquirer is going to want to see in place.
Maybe just moving on to client services. In what ways does an effective client services model help to build and contribute to value?
Similar to new business, agencies with effective client services models build more value for quite straightforward reasons, actually. Retention and revenue security, so that back to that assurance piece, are incredibly important for buyers. So long-term, high-value clients are absolutely essential in building value from an agency perspective, but also in terms of the credibility that a buyer is going to place on the agency model itself. Winning new business consistently, as we've just described, is pretty hard, particularly when the market is sluggish. So having and developing a bedrock of stable, high-value clients provides revenue predictability. And that's the basis for credible forward planning, including growth planning. So ensuring that key client relationships are secure is absolutely essential. As agencies, we need to continually demonstrate the value that we're bringing to clients. If sales and new business is about positioning value, then effective client services from a retention and future growth perspective is about demonstrating the value that we're continually bringing. So we need to reiterate that, and a good client services proposition will be based on that demonstration and reiteration of value. But that means a number of things have to be in play. Consistency in the provision of the solutions and services in a best-in-class fashion, so the core delivery and demonstration of that. Ensuring that we're building a position as a value creator rather than a commodity provider, so solutions and outcomes over services again. Senior client relationships, are we catering for the agenda and the priorities of the C-suite? Because that's where we really want to be, continually swimming upstream, providing high value services that cater for the strategic agenda of the business we're working for. And are we continually showing our understanding of the client, their market, their customers, and the dynamics that impact their future, the path going forward? So acting as that consultative standpoint as well, and thinking about what's next. But also alongside that is an ability to grow revenues from existing clients is really important. So a structured approach to client development. At base level, that means client account plans, well-structured business review sessions and client workshops, where we have the opportunity to position that value that we've created, have the client agree and iterate that, but also have the license to think about and talk about and engage with the client on what's next, the opportunities that we see to grow and expand, the threats that we see that need to be mitigated. And we're back to then thinking about pains and needs and wants with a what's next focus. And what acquirers will want to see is an ability to further develop those high level opportunities with existing clients and grow in partnership with the client. So developing that status as a trusted advisor with senior level relationships, sticky relationships that are long term, and a continuous focus on the demonstration of value and unlocking new potential areas of value. So that strong client services model supports all of those areas.
There's a growing emphasis on agencies becoming more consultative. And so how does the client services sort of support this?
Yeah, it's been a key theme in the commentary around agencies for the last 2 or 3 years now, and I think it's probably actually accelerating into 2025. So there's huge emphasis on agencies moving beyond services, as I talked about just beforehand, that concept of moving up the value chain a little bit, focusing less on commodity, easily replaceable, service-driven pieces into much more of strategic consultancy and partnership where there's higher value and emphasis on it. Clients increasingly want and need brains as well as hands. So the combination of being able to think and do for clients positions agencies much more strongly because clients need strategic support as well as executional support. So those services and relationships that are further up the consultancy scale tend to be higher value and they tend to be more sticky. Services or aspects of services that can become increasingly commoditized. They're lower value in the eyes of the client, and they're also importantly, without jumping into hyperbole, it's where AI is going to impact further and accelerate that. So the need is going to be to develop or gravitate towards a consultative offering higher up the value chain to avoid further commoditization and the negative impacts that come with commoditization, pressure on pricing, pressure on profitability. So effective CS can help, client services can help agencies gain that status within individual clients, continuing the conversation of what's important to the client, what are the pains and the needs, what are the next set of objectives and goals and direction, and how can we as a partner agency help and add value, evolve that relationship, continually push it forward through a much more consultative approach. But it can also help the model of the agency itself. What trends are we seeing at senior level across our client base? How does that inform what we become, have and do as our agency in terms of capabilities and competencies? And how does our model, our proposition, our way of working adapt to address those needs? So that CS function helps drive that consultative model, and that consultative model means being higher value longer term in terms of the relationships, more stability and revenue certainty, more credibility in terms of the way potential partners would scrutinize our model. Is it future-proofed? And that gives an element of credibility and reassurance to clients that are on the acquisition trail and perhaps looking at us.
What about sort of moving on to leadership development? How does the role of the founders or the owners need to evolve to support the development of value within an agency?
Yeah, I think Paul described the importance of developing a second tier, and actually in my example that I used at the very beginning, that building of a leadership team beyond the founders is absolutely essential. I think founders and owners need to start by looking at it from a buyer's perspective, and the buyer's view is quite simple. We need to be able to see a capable and proven leadership team in place to support the exit of the founders itself. This thing needs to be a going concern, needs to be additive, and the growth plans that we bought, one of the central reasons that we bought you in the first place, that growth plan needs to turn up, that future commercial performance, and it can't be woven in an interdependent sense on the founders themselves, because they're going to be exiting. So that's the end point, the target state. The starting point is often pretty chaotic, because we know that founders as owner managers are wearing many hats and doing many things. They're the sales director, they're the head of client services, they're the ops and delivery director, they're doing HR, they're doing finance. That's obviously not sustainable to support the desired end state of a sale-ready agency. But at some point in the scale-up journey, that recognition that it's unsustainable turns into tangible action. We need to support that as a value creation pillar activity. Otherwise, growth and development of the business is going to stagnate because of that over dependency. So we're not going to actually create value, never mind being sale ready. So for founders, building a capable senior team is absolutely necessary to support the scaling of the business. Increasingly, founders will need to focus on the business rather than being consumed in it. Founders will need to own and drive the strategy and the plan, the path to scaling and eventual exit. And to support that, they're going to need experienced specialists that can help scale and professionalize the business. HR, sales, finance, different areas, typically where the founders themselves are non-expert. And then, as Paul described, a second tier management team that ensures the ongoing continuation of the business with no dependency on the owners. The owners themselves, the founders, their role becomes different. It's about execution of the plan and ownership of the key drivers. It's about developing wider expertise and experience, typically countering founder limitations. And it's about creating bandwidth for the founders to go and progress the business. I talked about developing that M&A consciousness right at the start. That takes time, it takes energy, and it takes planning. So the whole succession piece needs to be central focus, but it needs to happen progressively through the scale up phase. Otherwise, value creation will be difficult, never mind value realization.
And what sort of common issues do agencies come up against in making these key transitions?
Reluctance to let go from a founder perspective. I'm sure we've all been there in terms of the roles that we've had, but developing that trust in others. And also typically, a lot of the things that we're talking about here in terms of marketing and sales and succession planning, development and CS, they're investments. So they come at a time of readiness for the business where it's ready to make investments, and that kind of emotional change in terms of leadership needs to take place as well, because we're talking about businesses that have typically been very cost conscious, starting to think about an investment strategy over anything else. And so the worry about costs and benefit and how that plays out is usually a concern. There's also something about exposure. As we're asking founders and owners to gravitate towards a new skill set themselves, developing that strategic driving piece, it's much more of a CEO type of mentality. They have to learn about that. They have to be effective at strategy setting, governance, and that's a step change for leaders. They're not always comfortable with that. And then the other thing is prioritization. What value drivers need focus first, and what am I as a founder good at, not so good at? So how do I ensure that what I'm doing and developing is continually developing the bench strength of the business to allow me to progressively push forward? There are often concerns at this stage as well around loyalty. So should I promote from within? Should I bring outside skills to the organization? And a recognition piece, a difficult recognition piece on behalf of founders, in that the team that got me to where I am right now might not be the team that takes me further forward towards being SEAL ready. But when that's decided, there are other complexities as well, things like incentivization. As you bring more senior people into the organization, they expect more in terms of salary, perhaps EMI schemes, etc. So you're increasing the complexity of the business model as well at the same time. So all of those components become important. But the main, in my experience, the biggest one is getting and gradually pushing the founders to let go so they can spend more time on the strategic plan and out of the business. Single biggest challenge.
So there's potentially some difficult decisions to be made. And I think it's, and also a bit of kind of self-recognition of what founders and owners' capabilities are, because I think it's fair to say not all founders and owners are capable of moving into that role because they enjoy doing the doing. And that's sometimes why certain agencies don't grow. So then I guess we're looking at perhaps outside hires or non-exec directors or chairmen coming in to fill some of those more strategic roles.
Often it is. Often it's about external support or looking at new skills and competencies that don't start, that aren't incumbent in the agency today. And it's about being respectful to most agencies. Most agencies start from a position of subject matter expertise. They're great at creative, they're great at performance marketing, etc. And they spin up as a business through that ability and skill set. Most of the people that run agencies that I know and work with have never done MBAs. They've never gone to business school, and they haven't woke up at any point in their time and think, I'd love to be the CEO of a £10 million agency. It happens partially organically and increases in structure as you go forward. So yes, there are difficult decisions to make about, firstly, the ambition state. Where do I really want this to go? Partly based on potential, but partly based on appetite of the founders. And then the secondary set of questions, which is, well, based on that ambition state that I want to drive towards, what's required to get us into that place? What platforming do we need? What people and skill set do we need? And assessing that against where we are today starts to tease out that plan that we talk about around the value drivers. But you're right, it's not just about working on the value drivers themselves, it's having the right skill sets and expertise to be going and delivering against those areas of the business as well. And typically, founders, although they tend to be pretty T-shaped and pretty broad in terms of the skill set, their true expertise will lie in 2 or 3 areas of the business, not in 7 or 8 areas of the business. And as you grow and develop, each one of those areas becomes more complex, has more needs against it. So yes, it's a period of difficult decision making and planning and plotting of not just what are we going to do, but how are we going to make that happen.
So just want to bring Paul back into the conversation, just in terms of how sort of leaders begin to think about key value drivers, how they assess them, and just from a value perspective, are there any particular value drivers that are more important to others?
Yeah, so I'll spin that question on its head slightly by firstly talking about why agencies don't sell. So over the past 12 years working with agencies on M&A, there's been various common themes throughout. Agencies at their core are their people and their clients, as you've been hearing from Steven. And when it comes to why agencies don't sell, it's typically either a client reliance, an owner reliance, or both. Either of those can lead to downward pressure on valuations or putting an acquirer off completely. The number of times I've heard agency owners say, oh, this client's been with us for X number of years, they'll never leave us. And then sadly, through a deal or through an earn-out, that client unfortunately chooses to move away, leaving the owner in quite a difficult situation if there's a client reliance, and therefore acquirers will always take the worst case scenario view when they're assessing an agency. So actively taking it back to the drivers of value, using things to actually take steps to optimize the value drivers to minimize those 2 risks are absolutely crucial and will stand agency owners in good stead. So if we go back to in terms of what could influence client reliance, it's diagnosing, okay, why have you got a client reliance? Is it your value proposition? Is it your sales and marketing function is preventing you from winning work? Is it you don't have enough senior people to deliver, and so you've got an individual reliance? You need to get to the core of the issue, regardless, and just take a really honest look at what is the issue at hand.
Yeah, yeah. And what about the way that value drivers interact with other aspects of deal structures, such as the earnout?
So again, this comes back to the previous question. I think Steven as well alluded to, he talked about risk and acquirers' senses of risk. Buyers will always look to approach deal structures, yes, to incentivize behaviors, but also to minimize risk. If we talk very positively to start with, if you're a high growth agency, a lot of the deal structure discussion is likely to be off the back of, okay, how are you going to achieve this 3-year forecast that you've prepared? What are the data points demonstrating why you're going to achieve it, and then be incentivized to hit that through the earnout. Conversely, if there are risk factors at play, buyers are going to want to minimize those risk factors by paying less cash up front, linking an earnout to retaining a client or retaining staff. So if you've got red flags on value drivers, it's going to impact both the multiple as well as your cash consideration.
And how far in advance should agency owners start thinking about all of these things? I'm sensing that often it's they leave it a bit too late.
I would say, yeah, it's never too early. I agree with Steven. It's sort of 3 years out is a good amount of time to make changes and to allow those changes to have an effect.
So then last question, we've got 2 minutes left. So for both of you, what would be your top tip for an agency owner that's considering going on this journey? So maybe starting with you, Steve.
Oh, that's a good question. I think I'm going to ask probably fairly simplistically, but start at the end of the journey and work backwards. What does the agency need to be at the end point in terms of definition of sale ready? How does that correspond with where you are today? Devise a structured plan with as much fidelity as possible right now over an extended period of time, possibly 3 years. And then the last thing I would say is stick to that plan rigorously. If you can make all decision making in service to the wider plan, the end point, then you'll probably make more of the right decisions more often.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. And Paul?
I think my top tip is be honest with yourself as a founder when assessing your value drivers. There's absolutely no way to game the situation for a deal process. Your business is going to be under the microscope for 3 to 6 months, potentially longer. If there's weaknesses, they will be discovered. So assess them upfront, manage them, optimize them, and do whatever you can to build and improve them over time.
Good advice. So thank you all very much. Thank you so much for joining us, Stephen, and thank you, Paul, and thank you, George, for all of your valuable insights. I'm sure everyone's got a lot of takeaway points from that. So we're wrapping up today. Just a reminder, we've got the launch of our How Agencies Stay Ahead, the DNA of Winning Agencies, coming up on the 29th of January. And that's actually an in-person event in the afternoon. We'll be sending out invites. So hopefully see some of you at that as well. And then we've got another webinar in the series on Tuesday, the 25th of February, how to get your people and financials exit ready. So that invite will follow in a few days also. So hopefully some of you will be able to join us for that. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this morning, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.